Hey Renuka, welcome. Happy Friday. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Raji, for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for making some time. How are
Yeah,
you and family doing during these crazy times?
it's all good. Just feeling very lucky to have space for us all to operate out of the house and keep each other sane. So, all
Yep.
good. Yeah.
Yep. It's been quite a journey. I remember actually when we first met, it was what, 6+ years ago at some event, Digital Orlando, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you were director of the AAA e-business unit, and we got to talking and kind of
Yeah.
lost. And then here we are back together again at the Orlando Tech Council. Thanks for your leadership of the ecosystem committee there.
Thank you. I'm enjoying it. It's been a great way to find out what's happening in the community and to get involved in helping make some changes. So, it's all good.
Absolutely. Cool, and I'll provide a little bit of an introduction, and we can talk a little bit about how your approach has been to digital transformation. But to provide some background for our listeners, you started in business analysis a decade and a half, more than that ago, and user research, right? That is that
Mm-hmm.
background, and moved on to digital strategy, and from there you've been in strategic leadership roles at AAA and Accesso, overseeing digital transformation initiatives and customer experience. So that is quite, that is the perfect experience for what we're trying to share information about here at 2M2X. So I'd love to hear about kind of the overall arc of your career and how you've kind of charted your career path there. And your experiences in terms of in going from one role to the other, and how intentional that was, or if it just happened. I'd love to hear how that evolved.
Well, first of all, again, thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. I'm very passionate about strategy and digital transformation and innovation, and particularly uh, with the opportunity to transform non-native services into customer experiences or problem-solving solutions. As you noted, my path into it is a little bit non-traditional, though I'm not sure there's a traditional path into anything anymore. Uh, my entree into the business world was really in competitive intelligence and customer trend tracking. It's still very much a passion of mine. I like to understand people's behavior and how they shift and how technology either drives that or the changes in technology are driven by that. I did start in research, as you noted, and really started to understand very early on, particularly at AAA, how everything was moving online. People's expectations of access and usage were really transitioning to the digital space. And as part of the strategy team helping to shape the enterprise strategy, I started to make a lot of noise about how we needed to be more in digital and make access more seamless. Um, and there was concern about cannibalizing the physical traffic into the stores. So, how do we balance that? And from there, I moved into product, still on the strategy and communication side, but it very, very quickly became still chasing that data. What data do we have? What's the performance? What is the outlook of how things are going to be? Not what they are today, but going to be. Um, and as my boss at the time put it, I was the person making the most noise about the data. And so I was charged with putting it in place, implementing the digital analytics strategy, which turned into, we have all this data now. How do we use it to improve our products and services? And I moved into product management. So part of it was luck, part of it was me chasing the problem, which I recommend highly for anybody entering this field. Look to where the problems is. For me, the fun is always in the messy stuff. So from there, I moved into the e-business team at AAA, which I helped to start. I think I was the first or second hire into that team, and really started to consolidate the AAA national offices uh, approach to digital strategy. When I left AAA, my team and I were responsible for all of the front end facing services, the core services that the national office provides the clubs and to members. So the mobile apps, travel planning tools, AAA.com, and road service online. And we can talk about this a little bit more later, but really the digital transformation aspect of it became apparent after we launched the front end, the mobile apps and the websites, and realized that in order for that customer experience to be good, um, we really needed to go backwards into the infrastructure, into the legacy systems that supported all of that. Um, so we can talk about that more later. But from there, I took a 1-year career sabbatical because I wanted to do some things like hiking up a mountain in Bhutan while I was still able. And then started with Accesso. They had grown through acquisitions, but hadn't really integrated any of the different divisions. And my role, I was the first person hired to help integrate everything from product discovery all the way through to the implementation planning, how to resource the teams, and really enjoyed my time there until, of course, COVID hit. But that also was a really interesting challenge that I enjoyed.
Cool. That's fantastic. That is exactly the kind of conversation I was looking to have also, because it's all about the customer, isn't it? I mean, you start, the closer you can get to understanding customer segments and needs, the first step is to create the empathy before getting into the solutioning, right? So how did you approach learning about customer needs in a structured way? I guess with the context of AAA, you said this was really brand new to AAA in the e-business side of things. And you were creating these online offerings and mobile offerings. So it's kind of, it's like it's got, you've got that, the white page syndrome of, you got an open blank slate here to work with. So how do you figure out what do you start with?
So I'd say two things. The first one is the problem is when we start with a blank slate. AAA is a 100-plus-year-old organization that delivers 35 million road service requests a year. I'll talk specifically about the road service online aspect of it. Putting a app as functional as it was. So we had, you can access it through the website and you can access it through the mobile AAA mobile app. Making that available was sort of a no-brainer. But the challenge was definitely, we could do as much as we could. So we had the data there to show where we were losing conversions for the mobile app aspect of it. But try as hard as we could, we couldn't get conversions up past, I think, 15, 20% in the early days, simply because the moment the user hit that point of friction with the infrastructure that was designed for a call center operator very successfully. I mean, AAA satisfaction rate, I believe still is, and at the time was very, very high. So the business end of it, the operations ran beautifully in the way that it had been structured. But then you layer this fully digital aspiration on there, the system underlying it just wasn't set up to support that. So at the time when I got ownership, or when my team got ownership of road service online, it was a sliver, a tiny, tiny percent of all road service calls. But there's immense cost savings there. There's immense customer expectations there. So how do we make the business case for an investment to change something that was working pretty well? And that's what the data came in. We were able to demonstrate using the data from road service online, using, and this is the part where my background in competitive intelligence and research really came into play. It wasn't just take the data from the mobile app. It was take the data from the mobile app, take the data from the website, look at the customer sentiment analysis, the social chatter that was happening, So we were able to take data from every data source that we had, whether it was online or offline, and construct a picture of performance that we then took to the board to say, if you want to continue to be competitive and deliver the quality of service that you've delivered through the more legacy channels, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, they work, um, then you're going to have to open up this infrastructure and remove the points of friction that are holding back digital adoption at this point. So really, I mean, the gold mine was the years of data the company had, and then we added to it with layering on new data to answer the questions that we were then having.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So, can you share some stories on that, like where you use data? And like you said, there's data coming from multiple channels. So, what questions do you ask of what channel, and how did that change your thinking about what you were going to do next?
Uh, so the first and the bigger challenge was really figuring out what data we had and who had it and what it was intended to do, and so that it wouldn't, well, there was going to be bias because so if it was a member survey, then if it was a paper survey, then we were going to have a particular type of people who responded to that survey. If it was a mobile response on or AAA.com, it was going to be a different kind of audience. So it was really thinking about the context of the data that we were collecting, how complete and clean it was, and then really starting to put that together. Um, I'd like to say there was a deep, deep science to it, and there was in the collection of it. But when it came really down to constructing the story, it was a group of us looking at all of the data. So, the market research folks, there's some really great experts in that field of research, having them analyze the data that came out of their sources, the mobile data, the digital channel, the infrastructure data. I learned more about logs than I ever thought I needed, but really understanding that and constructing a picture based on the expertise of the people that were generating it. Lots of really interesting conversations. And how do you then summarize that into a succinct story that you could take upwards? A lot of fun, but definitely not a clean, simple process.
Right, right. So how do you, I guess, gather insights from that? Like, do you sit like a group of leaders sitting together and coming up? So, there's the qualitative aspect of data and the quantitative aspect of data. And part of the qualitative process, I'm sure you guys are trying to figure out, like, what is the hypothesis behind certain behaviors. And so did you have, were you following a particular structure, or was it more kind of open-ended exploration, or how did you go about trying to figure out what the data is telling you and how to derive some insights and experimentation that comes from that insight?
I'd say it was really critical to make sure we had the right people at the table. So I mentioned the market research experts. We also had to have the operational experts. I was the person that helped to bring the conversation together, but I was not at the time, for sure, the expert in road service delivery. But I could certainly help enable the conversations where you look at a data set and somebody with expertise in that field would say, this is what it means. And I would say, okay, but from the mobile side, which was my direct area of purview, they get to this point in the user journey and then the conversion drops by 80%. What is happening here? So it was really, here's the big mess of things that we have gathered. What's the story coming out of it? Where are the gaps in the story? We did lay out using some templates for readily available templates for customer journey mapping, everything that we knew. And then where the stories didn't reconcile in the data, we explored further and saying, okay, this data set says, a highly satisfied, and this data set says highly dissatisfied. Is that channel driven, and why, and what's happening? So it did start to get narrowed down, and visualizing it through a customer journey map really helped.
Fantastic. That's what I was looking for. Yeah. And that's a very important point because a lot of digital transformation leaders feel like they have to run with the ball and they have to lead the process and kind of bring the insights and all of that. But the approach you just shared is so critical because there's people who are working these jobs and there's people who are experts in different areas and really enabling them to bring their insights into the process who understand that particular business function way better than you know
Yes.
just because we have a digital background doesn't mean we're an expert in every aspect of the business. So what you just described of tapping into that by giving them prompts, giving them questions that they can then go analyze and come back to you with hypotheses, and then fitting that into the overall customer journey map. That is a great insight for our audience if they're looking into that. Definitely don't think of this as a process of where tech is kind of steamrolling the team. It's quite the opposite. Building that partnership the way you talked about and letting people engage on that process is such an important thing.
And I mean, one of the lessons learned out of that whole process was very much along those lines. Digital transformation is less about the technology and more about the people. Uh, the if the right stakeholders at every level of the organization are not involved in the transformation process, it's going to fail, whether it's in terms of expectations or buy-in, or a lot of times there's issues of job security and having to learn new things. A big part of working in an organization where things have been run really, really well for a very long time is the risk of a digital transformation professional coming in and saying, okay, now I'm going to change everything. You're going to have new tools that you're going to have to learn. There's going to have to be a real, not just a business case making, but a real collaborative approach to saying, what the problem is when the people who are actually in the trenches doing the service delivery don't really actually have a problem. So it's opening that up and explaining, not just explaining, but participating in the problem solving aspect of it. To me, that's really the biggest challenge of a digital transformation role, is not knowing where the roadblocks are in terms of the people. And you could roll out the biggest plan on the planet, the best laid one, but if the operator in the vehicle or in the retail location doesn't want to use that product, it's over.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a human element on both sides, right? There's the internal human element and the external customer human element. We talked about the external one with the data and seeing what
Mhm.
they do and capturing analytics. It's a whole different thing when you're talking about internal teams. And what you touched on there is very, very critical because when you're talking about transformation, you're talking about job definitions changing, skills, being found deficient or needing new skills in the area. There's political challenges and navigating all of that. As a leader who's trying to do digital transformation, you need to have a lot of skills right at your disposal.
Mhm.
But you need to have a lot of confidence first of all to try to push this thing through. You need to have the tactical news of just being able to know who's what the objectives are for each group and each leader. And then there's the process thing that we talked about with analytics and really being data driven. So can you share some stories about that, like just the personal challenges of trying to get a transformation to happen within an organization?
I'll share one from my time at Accesso. The company, as I said, had grown through acquisition, uh, and the investment strategy was that an integrated solution would put the company in a much better place competitively. And to me, that was very true. But when I started the company, when I was looking at the company to join the company, it was very clear that it was all different silos for a reason. There's a reason why, as there is for most kinds of things, for why things are the way they are. My charter was really to help deliver and create and deliver an integrated solution and set it up for success, and then help create a framework for the company to start to merge so they could come up with the efficiencies that they had been promised. The challenge for me was you have these 6 divisions totally, but 5 that were involved in the product uh, that had been running successful businesses for some time. Each had their own processes, their communication tools, their technology stacks, their release cadences. Everything that you could think of that could be different was different. So, how do you bring the teams together to deliver an integrated solution for a client? And I did, I looked at this and thought, okay, where do we start? And you go back to the thing that you're most comfortable with. And I started with, okay, what is the customer, in this case, the client, getting? And I literally mapped out all of the products, all of the tools, everything for the client, in this case, was a theme park operator. Everything from, how many handheld devices and formats are you providing because of the different divisions? What are the different points of sale? What are the data extracts? What BI feeds are they getting? And I mapped it out very simply. And I carried that piece of paper, literally printed out piece of paper with me everywhere I went. And once people saw what um, the customer, the client experience could be, I was able to build consensus on what we needed to do. It made the conversations at every level of the organization easier to have. I mean, politics play a role, and that's human nature everywhere. But it was the one point of agreement that everybody could come together, whether it was the team in the UK or in Australia or in San Diego or Lake Mary. Um, but it took some time for me to sort of get to know what the products and services were and then lay it all out. Uh, and that required collaboration and leadership and participation from each of the different divisions. Everywhere I've worked, the technology, the architects are my friends because they know how everything works. Um, and the approach they take from a technical view is very much the approach I like to take from a strategy view. What is the best way to hang this all together in a way that's sustainable moving forward? Um, so, I partnered with the technical architects to help figure out, what are we delivering? What do I not know? Who else should I talk to create my one sheet of paper to then help build the vision around what we could do? There was a lot of discussion from a technical perspective on how it should be done, but the harder part to me was, what should we do? Which identity solution should we use? And it became easier as more and more people bought into it. Does that answer your question?
It does. It nails it. Because what you just mentioned is a great tool for other leaders as well, which is really bringing that alignment. And the fact that you came up with this idea to print out that sheet of paper to get that alignment and taking it with you everywhere you go is a great hack. Hopefully people are listening and take that idea forward because I really like it. We, in our organization, in Formulate, we do digital transformation for our clients. And we're often in the meetings where, hey, we've got alignment with some top leaders. We know what the direction is, great. And we go into middle management and we have conversations. And, you often have to talk people off the ledge, which is, I'm sure, what you're running into there. Because, hey, I want to do it this way. No, we really should do it this way. And if you're at that level and there's a disconnect, you have to be able to go up a level to find that alignment and say why there's, what is the overall objective of what you're trying to achieve, what he's trying to achieve, what she's trying to achieve, and what we together are trying to achieve. If we don't have that alignment, then we're never going to solve those kinds of problems because it's just going to be he said, she said. But that being able to zoom up a level to get that alignment and then work towards a solution, which we call the align, explore, solve, is how we approach it in a 3-step way. uh, I love that you have a hack for that. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
see if I can come up with something like that for our meetings going forward. I love a one sheet paper if you can put that in front of people. You're not doing a whole presentation. You just get alignment quickly because you can't really argue with the fact that this is our overall structure. This is our overall vision.
I
So
think also thinking back, what helped was that I wasn't trying to come up with the solution. I was illustrating the problem and inviting the teams to come up with the solution, which one, I played to my strengths, which is what's the problem? What are we trying to solve for? Uh, but it also allowed them to play to their strengths. I wasn't stepping on their toes with saying, do it this way. I think that's one advantage of not having the technology background, a more detailed technical background, um, is I wasn't going in there prescribing the solution to the problem that I was raising.
absolutely, that is so critical. You can't get engagement if you're always prescriptive. And but the thing that you brought up, which is so critical, is the alignment, and then calling out the constraints of what you're trying to solve and what parameters and resources you have to solve that problem, and then helping that solution come to you is really powerful. Cool. Yeah, that is something that'll, we need those kinds of techniques as we navigate the political landscape. We really have to make sure that people feel included. So that's really good. Any other, lessons learned, any tips and tricks you want to share with kind of leaders who are starting this journey and trying to do digital transformation within their organization?
Just two more, and they're related to everything else that we've talked about. Big transformative initiatives, the kinds that have strategic significance, are not a one and done, and they don't happen overnight. So it's really setting expectations at every level of the organization that it's going to take some time. It's going to take a step-by-step approach. Um, and a lot of times, if somebody's invested $50 million in a transformation effort and it is appearing in the investor decks and board updates, what happened with that? Well, the communications aspect of it is critical in managing, reporting progress, reporting changes, being agile about it. I think the principles of agile apply here very, very strongly. Uh, you create a 25-page presentation deck and it's obsolete by the time the board signs off on it. It's really, here's the vision, here's what we're going to strive towards, here's how we're going to adapt, and really on communicating over and over that it's going to take time and that it's not a one and done. It's continuous evolution.
Yep, that's a
Not
great
always easy to do, but important.
that's a great one, and it's also hard to negotiate, right? Because in the old world, you're used to having plans and roadmaps, and then you kind of execute that roadmap, and you get there. But in the digital world, things are evolving so fast. You have a general direction, but how you get there could change over time. You could start down one path and find that there's another path faster. So how do you get sign off from top leaders to basically say, hey, we're going to experiment, or we're going to try it out and see what happens and react to the information, rather than saying this is step one, step two, and step three?
In the 20 plus years that I've been working, I think things have changed. I think a big part of it is the introduction of Agile into the technology teams. And particularly where the teams have transitioned into it, and there's been training and a sort of a deliberate step into Agile. I think that storyline is easier to carry up and down through the organization. There's a growing recognition over the course of my career that it is not a one and done. It's if you engage a consultant to come in and tell you how to transform your business, it's not a 3-month engagement or report and move on. It is continued participation in the evolution of it, the responsibility for communicating on progress, for tracking the metrics, really keeping an eye on what's important, and repeating it over and over and over again almost till you're sick of it. But I really do see the organizations that have adopted Agile, I think it's much easier for them to say, uh, oh, okay, this is an iterative approach. Um, the other thing with some of the nonprofits that I've been working with lately, it's very much, why don't we start small and see? Let's try it out with one step. Um, and that's been an easier take because at that point, you're not asking them to invest all of their grant money or all of their funds into a big project. You're saying,
Let's
let's
do
try this with $5,000. And then if it works, we'll add another one. It's basically Agile, but without the capital A attached to it.
Yeah, it's the MVP. So absolutely, that makes sense. So on that note, I mean, obviously this is a wealth of information, but what do you rely on in terms of tools, methodology, resources that you've been depending on?
So I read everything. And for me, for the work that I do, the Pew Research Organization has a great deal of information on digital use and customer preferences, and has been for me for many, many years. I also follow a blog called the Farnham Street Blog,
Oh, I
fs.blog.
love that one. I love it.
Yeah,
I
he covers everything, but the approach to mental models and laying things out is really good from a structure and process perspective. Uh, those are two that I'd recommend. I think if companies haven't had agile training, they should. I am certified in change management. So ProSci is an organization that trains people on sort of enterprise change management with the people side of things at a pretty good level. And then I'm a big fan of customer experience, human factors, training, and research for anybody who's involved in any sort of a transformative initiative. IBM has a great design thinking free course that I've recommended to people that I mentor. And, it's very simplistic, but for somebody who's not used to the approach, it's a nice step into it. Um, I also like for nonprofits a civic technologist practice guide. It's by a woman named Sid Harrell, uh, who I worked with many, many years ago at AAA, but she's in this whole field of user design for civic applications. I also follow the hashtag CivicTech on Twitter, which has been a great wealth of information for me. I know that's a lot.
No,
I'll
that's
send
great.
you the links. Yeah.
Yes, please,
Yeah.
because I'm sure our audience would love to get access to those links, and I'll make sure to post it on the blog when we roll it out. That's great stuff. On that note of Civic Tech, you're currently engaged as the co-chair at 100 Women Strong,
Mhm.
and I've heard some great things about it. And I've also heard that you're doing experimentation in a very different way than most other nonprofits and working with data in a different way too. Care to share a few things about that?
Sure. So 100 Women Strong is part of a network of giving circles around the country. It's a group of women who pool our resources together. It's a membership, not a fundraising organization. And each year we invest. So if we have 100 members, we would have $100,000. We invest that pool of money in seed funding for an initiative. Sometimes it's seed funding, sometimes it's to accelerate or scale an initiative that's working well somewhere else. So it's very focused on women and children's issues, which there's a huge array of very complicated interrelated issues. So we've worked on mental health, early childhood learning. This year, we're going to be looking at how financial independence plays a really big role in women returning to abusive situations in their homes. So the number one reason women return to domestic partner abuse situations, environment, is because they don't have the money to sustain themselves independently. it's 70% or so. So how, what are the initiatives already in the community that we can help bring together to target that uh, segment to help improve the outcomes? The thing that we do really, really well is a very collaborative approach to grant making. We do a bunch of research up front, and then we bring people who already know, have subject matter expert and are doing things to come up with new ways in which to do them. That's been the best part of it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that is one thing I really appreciate about you is your heart for community service. And we're lucky. I have quite a few friends who are very engaged and committed to the community, and you're one of them. So really appreciate that work that you do there. So on that note, any asks for us, for the audience? Like, what can we do to help you with the mission for 100 Women Strong? How can we help?
So I have a fairly big ask, and it's a change in philosophy, a change in approach. I think all of us digital professionals take for granted many things about the audiences that we serve. So particularly, and I don't claim to be an expert in the nonprofit world, but what it has brought to light for me very much is the assumptions that we make about the people that we serve, particularly the more vulnerable ones. So if you're delivering essential services, if you're hiring or whatever services that people are going to have access to, think about the digital divide, think about the access, something as basic as internet access, and how people are going to be interacting with you. I think a lot of the services that I've been digging into over the past year and a half lack a sense of humanity. And I think we need to keep that in mind as we're delivering these, as we're creating these transforming services. Somebody said yesterday in the summit that we held, when the pandemic ends, the digital divide will not. And that has really struck with me just for some time now.
That is very insightful. Thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate you making some time for us today, sharing your wisdom about all the digital transformation stuff, but especially thank you for the work that you're doing for the community as well through 100 Women Strong and the OTC. Thanks so much, Renuka. I really appreciate it. Keep doing
Thank you for having me.
All the best.
Take care.
Have a great one. Take care.
Bye-bye.